If the primary motivation is, I just want to make money, I would say don't do like start up a ketamine clinic because you'll probably make more money just working at your regular job in the or emergency department without all the other thoughts about opening up a clinic.
3, 2, 1, lift off.
Welcome back to the Ketamine StartUp Podcast. This is where we talk about how to start a ketamine infusion clinic, how to market it, and more. And today, Sam and I are going to have a conversation about the top 10 ways you can fail as a ketamine clinic.
And we will describe each one of these and talk more about each one. So number one, prescribing at-home ketamine without proper supervision. And what I mean by this is we know that the safest way to administer ketamine is at a medical clinic with physicians and clinicians who know what they're doing. And especially with all this going on with Matthew Perry and even some of these telehealth companies that are prescribing massive doses of at-home ketamine, it can be quite concerning of what is going on in this space. So it's really crucial that when you are prescribing at-home ketamine, if you choose to do it with some sort of supervision. I think that ketamine in itself is fairly safe, but when it's mixed with other substances, that can be dangerous and you don't really know what the patients are doing. Also, it can cause changes in their vital signs, whether that's hypoxia or very elevated blood pressures, but more importantly, like the external factors around the individual at home. For example, are they going to be near a bathtub or a swimming pool or jacuzzi? Are they going to be unsupervised and walk out into the middle of the street or start making some tea and then all of a sudden forget to turn off the burner on the gas oven? Like some of these things that are not necessarily just the ketamine, but the external factors, that can be concerning. What are your thoughts on this, Kim?
Of course, I totally agree with you on this. I think it's not just about prescribing the medication. It's also talking about safely discharging a person as well. Even our patients, our clinic, we talk about how, you can't drive yourself home. You have to have somebody there to support you. We highly recommend having somebody there to support you. Some patients take some time to recover, even after recovering from the experience of themselves or the treatment itself in the clinic. So I can't even imagine a person going through all of that type of experience or having such a high dose alone or in a way that they could potentially be a harm to themselves or even to potentially others. I think that example you gave of, there's been plenty of times that I going to heat up a pan so that I could cook some egg and step away. Then somebody is at the door and I go to it and then I go, what's that smell? So even not being on ketamine, there are these opportunities of mishaps or near misses. And so just adding that level of actually having ketamine in your system at home just takes it to a totally different level. So I think it's just overall, this is one that should be sidestepped or not dealt with by simply just don't go there.
Yeah. And I do also want to add, I would highly encourage people to never prescribe specifically someone to use it intramuscular by themselves or at the house. I think there is a role for at-home troches, ketamine at the appropriate dosing and the frequency spaced out duration-wise, but definitely never prescribing vials of the ketamine with a needle and say, hey, good luck, go do this. I think that is definitely a way to fail as a ketamine clinic owner and operator.
So for number 2, ignoring set and setting about the ketamine treatment experience. For those who aren't familiar what set and setting are, set is short for the patient's mindset, where their head is at when they're going to get the treatment, and setting is the environment, the setting in which they're receiving the treatment. The person is coming in very scared, or they just, right before they came in, their purse was stolen. The experience they're going to have going into the treatment is going to be very different than somebody who had been meditating very frequently several days before, has been journaling, has an intention before, and coming in with a very peaceful mind. Or it's your clinic is super busy and it's noisy and your staff is chatting away and the patient is receiving the treatment, that's going to be very different. We've been on the receiving end of patients that have gotten to other clinics that have not been mindful of set and setting, where there was people chatting the entire time, or they were advised, oh yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can play on your phone if you want. That experience is going to be different. They completely ignored it. Therefore, when they're at our clinic or clinics that are very mindful of this practice of set and setting, the patient's experience and the way they transform is so different.
Absolutely. And ketamine is a unique drug where the set and the setting does play a critical role in the treatment. I know if someone's getting IV antibiotics, like it doesn't matter what their mindset is or what the environment is, but ketamine is in a way, it's not a classical psychedelic medication, but it does amplify what that patient's mindset is. And I think it was either Tim Leary or Stan Groff who said, hey, these medications are simply non-specific mental amplifiers, meaning that whatever is going on in that person's mind, it's going to amplify it. So that leads me to the concept of a setting. If someone feels, like Kim had mentioned, unsafe, I don't trust these people. There's a lot of noise going on in the background and paper shuffling and staff laughing and talking. Like that's going to impact as well that person's experience because the setting does play a crucial role. And now that at Reset Ketamine, we've been open for 6+ years now, like it really highlights that experience of the setting and how critical it is for the patient's experience with ketamine therapy.
And I think setting also what people can get confused too about when they're going, okay, I'm all for it. I want to have a good environment, a beautiful environment. They can get hung up on making a like beautiful medical spa, gorgeous looking clinic, and maybe have the overhead high because they want it to be beautiful because, oh, I'm a cash pay clinic and I want it to have a certain look. That's all great and stuff. But what's included as part of the setting is you, the clinician, the person providing the treatments, the staff there. And so if the staff's head is not in the right place, if the doctor or the clinician who's providing the treatment is not mentally present, that is also affecting the setting. So you can have the most gorgeous, beautiful clinic in the world, but if you're just phoning it in, the patient is very attuned to that. We've probably all had that experience at some point where we went to get a checkup or get labs drawn or have a follow-up after some sort of procedure. And you can just tell that the provider was just phoning it in. They're just moving the meat. That moving the meat was a negative setting. So do the opposite unless you want to fail. And at this point number 2 already. So remember, setting is not just the beautiful things, the crystals, the mood lighting, the water feature in the front. It's you. It's the energy, the presence of mind that you bring to.
Let's going to number 3, saying yes to every patient. Sometimes we want to help as many people as possible. We have this desire to help every single person who comes into the clinic. And to be honest, the simple truth is that not everyone is going to be a good fit for, number 1, ketamine therapy, and number 2, for you as an individual practitioner. Because one of the things I've noticed is that therapeutic alliance, which Kim had alluded to in the setting portion, that therapeutic alliance, i.e. the relationship between the patient and the clinician, also will impact the experience. So you need to be cognizant of, hey, this is not working in the hospital or the emergency department where you're bound by EMTALA federal rules and regulations, where you're obligated to see every single person who walks into the hospital. You actually get to select the appropriate patients for you in your practice. So that looks like medical screening, psychological screening, evaluating, making sure that number 1, they're safe physiologically to receive ketamine. And then number 2, are they a good fit for you and your practice? And going into a ketamine session with the patient where it's like that vibe or energy or relationship is off, I think can be pretty detrimental to the experience.
And you can already tell if it's going to go that direction. Yeah, especially if you're doing the appropriate screening. I don't want to say how you do anything is how you do everything, but how you do most things is how you do most things. Or I know I totally butchered that, but it's we've made this mistake. I know and I say we because I don't want to just say Sam, but when you do consultations, and some people do calls, some people do it in person, you can tell from the very beginning. And also noticing how they treat your staff and if they have support available, that can make it difficult for a person to be a good candidate, especially when you first start out. I know that a lot of us have come from a place of where we're just like, we need to help everybody. Like I have this privilege of having a medical license, or I've been trained and it's been indoctrinated to me that I have to treat every single person. And it can be tough to switch, especially when you're starting this new type of therapy and providing it, because it's not like what most of us have provided. It's not an eye surgery. It's not like just giving a antibiotic. There is this mental preparation. There is a therapeutic alliance that is very unique and special and needs to be treasured. And so it's very different. But it makes sense as to why we totally get it, why you would want to say yes. And also sometimes you're put into a position of where you want to say yes, or you feel you have to because your overhead is high. You're at a location that you're like, I've only gotten like 3 consultations this month and I need to pay my rent. I need to pay the lease. And so you're like, force yourself to have to say yes to somebody that you may not be ready yet. Remember when we first started, as a practitioner, you took straightforward cases or take simpler portions of a case and then you built on that. Nobody in the ER jumped straight to doing an intubation. You observed one, you did practice sessions in the sim lab, and you build up to it. So the same thing is for doing ketamine therapy, but also you're juggling the fact that you are a business owner, a small business owner too, something that you may not be familiar. So saying yes to everyone on top of all that can get you into trouble. Number 4, leaving your stable job too early. And so, Sam, why do you think that is a failure? How do we know that's a failure?
The reality is that once you open up the ketamine clinic, there may not be a long line of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 patients banging down that door. And because it can be slow to progress and build up patience, you have to have patience. And I know I'm mixing up those words, but patience, i.e., hey, let me just wait and see and have it gradually build up the base of people that are coming to the clinic, may take some time. And because it's going to take some time, going to keep that overhead low. And you probably want to keep that part-time job working in the emergency department or picking up that night shift or whatever it may be. That's what I did when we first started. Super slow, right? That was in 2018, 1 to 2 days of working in the, ketamine clinic. And I'm like, I have all these days off. What do I do? It was nice to have that ER gig where I could still work part-time to have that financial cushion. That was like, cool. Things are slow at the clinic. So it's nice to have that stability. And the other thing is, like, when you own a ketamine clinic, there are ebbs and flow to the patient volume. For example, in the Palm Springs area, the summers really slow down because a lot of people leave. It gets to 115, 120 degrees Fahrenheit out here. And so it slows down, meaning that it's nice to have that financial cushion. Now, this is great because for ketamine therapy, the patient doesn't need to come every single day. It's not like Monday, they're coming 5 days in a row, although for certain patients that may be the case, but in general for mood disorders, it's like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays for 3 weeks. Meaning that those other days, it's really nice to have that clinical job to give you that financial stability.
Yeah, that stability comes with time. And I think if you start on that footing of, I'm not going to be stable, we have to start seeing patients immediately, that's where you can get yourself into trouble, because then that leads to the point we just made before. You're saying yes to patients that you're not ready for or shouldn't be getting treatments. You're just like so busy about, let's get the patients in and out. So maybe you're not paying attention to set and setting and you're just like, no, that's fine and dandy, but is that going to move the needle financially? You start making these decisions based off of finances versus based off of what is best for the patient or what is aligned with your goals and values. And we're all for being, hardcore and going all in, but some things take time. Now, don't get me wrong. We've had people that we've worked with, people that have taken our course that, man, they have 30 infusions their first month. And it's wow. But also that same individual had mentioned there's times it's slower and there's ebbs and flows. It can be seasonality. It could be what's going on in the economy. It could be what is it tax season? There's just all these little things that you don't really notice when you're working in ER or you're working, like in my case, I was in an academic center where we're a level 1 trauma center. So we're getting eyeballs that are being globe ruptures from almost Arizona to there. And so we were busy. We always had things going on. But that's not the same thing for ketamine therapy. Number 5, you hire the wrong staff. And this seems pretty obvious, but I think there's some nuances to this, especially since we're talking about ketamine therapy.
Yeah, I think having the right people on the team, whether it's any business, is such a crucial component of a clinic because we made that mistake. I remember I just hired people haphazardly, to be honest, when I first started, because no one really taught us the basics. Like, when I'm working in the ER, I'm not hiring the RNs or techs or medical assistants. Like, that was outsourced. Other people were doing that for me. So I didn't really have those tools. And making the mistake of hiring the wrong people definitely, has happened. So how does one find the right people? And I think the answer to that, and Kim can, elaborate more on this, is I would say if I had to boil it down into one word, would be having them have the right values as you, aligning the values. I think a lot of people can be taught the procedural stuff and the technical stuff. So the ability to learn, but the values, whether that's kindness, friendliness, empathy, the ability to form connections, like some of these soft, non-tangible factors, I think that plays a really important role. Proactivity, right? So like finding the values that are important and that are within you, and then finding the right individual to do that and hire them for your team.
I think I totally agree with you. It's about values. And I think that brings up a really good point too of you need to be clear on your values. What are you valuing? What's important to you? What is your priority? Why are you opening this clinic? Or maybe why are you adding this to your list of services if you already have a clinic? And just having that be very clear, then you'll be very clear on who you're looking for, what you need from them, and then also knowing, are they aligned with how I'm going to do things? Because that's one of the things that we ran into when we're like, oh, okay, when we're going to hire people, it'll be easy because I've worked with great folks and I worked with not so great staffs in the hospital, and I'm going to do it differently because I'm on the floor. I know what's really happening. So I'm going to hire and I'm going to hire. Okay, if you don't really think about these things and you hire like somebody you've worked with in the emergency room or in your regular job, they're used to moving the meat where they're going, wow, the pace of a ketamine clinic is very different from a hospital, from a traditional healthcare system. The pace is very different, or I believe it should be very different rather. And if the person's not recognizing that we're going to go very slow here compared to what you're used to, or they're not willing to change their pace or match their pace with you, being on the same wavelength, that's where you can get yourself into trouble. And then also another point I want to bring up is hire slow, fire fast. I don't recall who has taught us that, but it's one of those things where you need to put people through a process. And that's something that nobody teaches you unless you actively seek out how to hire folks and how to vet them, how to do background checks and see what's going on. But not even getting to the point of talking about running background checks. It's actually making sure that person really wants to be at your clinic working there, and also not aligning just their values, but like they may seem great on paper, or when they fill out that first application or inquire about the position and you're like, wow, this person sounds great. But when you put them through the paces, when you have them go through your process to start hiring, if they can't go through all of that, if they're not going to they'll screen themselves out. And that is something that we had failed at when we first started, because we're like, sweet, you're available. We're a open by appointment only clinic. You're cool with that. You're not somebody who wants a 9 to 5. Fantastic. Come on board. And then we'd be like, okay, let's give them another chance. Oh, maybe I need to train better. And so let me train them, or let me show them the steps over again. So we're actually slow to fire. And that's where we had failed at that. But luckily, we had some other good practices that we could continue to actually still be here today and have a better hiring practice. But again, just It's not something they teach you. This is more that business end, and perhaps even like aligning with somebody who already knows HR and all that type of stuff might be worthwhile.
Yeah. And one book recommendation that has really supported us is the book Who, WHO. And we can put the link in the show notes for the Amazon book. But that is a really effective book on hiring and can be very incredibly useful, especially if you're not used to hiring someone routinely as part of your current job.
So number 6, failing to market effectively. Marketing is tough. I don't know if it's one of those things you can say it's simple, but not easy. I will say that it is simple in the sense of you want to present your clinic or be where the patients that you want to just be there, meaning they know you exist. They know you are trustworthy. They know they're aligned with you and you're aligned with them. And so they come to you. So I guess conceptually, it's very simple. It's very clear, but in practice, it's very difficult. I think it's because of our attention span is so dispersed or diffuse, and our attention span has gotten much shorter that everyone is kind of everywhere, where our attention is spread very thin. And yet at the same time, there are certain habits that we all have, which is we're online, we're searching for things. We have a question, we Google it. We have a question, we ask ChatGPT, or you're scrolling, you got your latest recipe or hack from TikTok or Instagram or some Facebook group. But as traditional medical clinics, or I feel like medicine is a very traditional, kind of almost old-fashioned practice, the tendency of new clinics is to do the TV ads, do the billboard, do the ads in the local paper or what do you call it? Business organization magazine. And that's where you could get really sidetracked because that idea of I need to be in front and visible, you get that in your mind. That's clear. That's great. But how to be front and visible isn't having this gorgeous billboard or highly produced commercial.
Yeah. And I think it was Peter Drucker who once said that the two most important functions of a business are innovation and marketing. So both, you got the ketamine side because that's very innovative, cutting edge. And then the marketing is that second crucial piece. I think the way to fail would be just to start up the clinic, but not do any marketing and being like, hey, we're open. Why isn't anyone coming? No one knows about you. No one, if they Google it, your website doesn't show up. Or if they go on Google Maps or Yelp or Psychology Today or any of these resources, you're not there. Your clinic's not there. The website isn't there, which is your digital storefront. And then they're not going to come to you. We had mentioned that there's probably not going to be this long line of 100 people just banging away at the door once you open. No, you have to market it. And I think Steve Jobs, former Apple founder, CEO, he made marketing one of the most important parts when he was thinking about launching a new product, because he knew that marketing was so important for the success of the Apple products. And similarly, the ketamine therapy there's some stigma and there's some fear around it and stereotypes. And so the marketing may even be more challenging to do. But again, as Kevin mentioned, it can be simple because it's simply just being where the patients are and finding that right person. So bottom line is not only opening, but number 2 is that marketing component and doing it very effectively.
I want to mention one other thing is that you don't have to wait to be actually standing in your clinic or actually have purchased everything to do the treatments if you already have a clinic. You can start the marketing of it before you even start with the landing page. I think there's a misconception of, it's not real until I'm standing in it. It's real when you personally, deep down inside, you decided that this is what I'm doing. It's aligned with my purpose, is aligned with how I want to provide treatments. I believe in how this is going to transform lives. I'm going to deal with whatever challenge may come. I'm ready. When you're there, then you can put up that landing page and you can start collecting emails of potential patients. You don't have to wait. And I know there's a waiting or coming up with more ideas, or I need to research more, or maybe let me find the right marketing team to help me with this or outsource it. That's just procrastination. And so if you could just do something super simple, do B+ work in this area. I make it a simple or even a C+ work. Just have a decent landing page. You just have it and you can start now. You don't have to wait. I think that's the big thing about marketing. It's You don't have to have the perfect product. I don't recall who was it. Was it Reid Hoffman that said, if you wait until you have the perfect product, it's already too late to launch? Where all of us here are, or whoever is listening, you're most likely worked in the medical profession and you've been taught, it's been drilled into you, you've been indoctrinated that it's perfection. People die if I'm not at my top game, if I'm not doing the most excellent. This is marketing, okay? No one, as long as you're not selling a false product, you can do C+ work. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful website. You know, just get something out there.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know what a landing page is, because that's, you may or may not know, but basically a simple one-page website. And the important thing is to have an email mailing list so that the person can subscribe to be notified of when the clinic launches. And I think Kim brings up a really good point because, yeah, the clinic doesn't have to be open. It could be saying, hey, we're launching in spring 2025 or fall 2026 or whatever it may be. But you can still market it and get the word out there, building that buzz even before it actually launches. And now that I'm mentioning it, I think a lot of like authors do this, for example, when they're working on a book or before it's actually been published, they may just release like one chapter of it or just one snippet. And then that gets the buzz going. And in a way, that's the landing page, that simple one-page website with just a way for a person to stay connected so that when you do open, that they become notified and aware of it upon launching.
So number 7, in the top ways you can fail as a ketamine clinic is by not taking ketamine therapy seriously. And what do we mean by that, Sam?
Ketamine therapy, it creates a very vulnerable space for patients. And number one, they're hurting. They've tried many different things. And if you don't take it seriously or you're treating this medicine with disrespect, then that can totally damage your credibility, not only for you and your clinic, but for the field as a whole. And I think for someone, because there is no subspecialty called ketamine therapy fellowship, that means you need to do the research. You need to read all of the major scientific publications. You need to understand the science behind it. You need to understand the contraindications, the people who can benefit, and really take this on as like a mini fellowship in a way, but on your own or through our course. So where you're like, okay, I need to know what I'm doing. There is no current academic institutions that actually have a specific ketamine fellowship training. By taking it seriously, like really becoming an expert, like literally, hey, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to learn it well to best serve my patients. I remember in med school, they told us that 50% of what we're going to learn in med school is wrong. And they don't know which 50% of that is correct or incorrect. So that means that they really pounded into us. You need to stay up to date. You need to read the latest scientific journals because medicine is evolving. It's changing. And I think when someone takes this seriously, they are going to stay up to date on the latest journals. They're going to have that set up that little Google News alert or Google PubMed, Google Scholar or PubMed little notification so that they can stay up to date. The other thing is ketamine. It's a very interesting drug. Creates these non-ordinary states of consciousness where they may have like mystical experiences or they may touch on the divine or feel like a connection with God. So it's not like a normal medication that we use. It does create, some people refer to these as entheogenic states. And that can be really powerful and it can be scary. And by knowing how transformational it can be and how strange it can be, number one, and explaining that to patients, like, yeah, this is very different. Like, it's not for everyone. I'll be honest with you. It can be quite effective, but it is very different from traditional medications. And so taking it seriously, becoming the expert, educating your patients on what they can expect, and really having respect for it. And I think that's really important. What are your thoughts, Kim?
I think to echo about what you said, that taking it serious, that this medication can cause these altered states and that you are providing that experience, recognizing that you wield a certain power. You already have that patient, clinician, practitioner dynamic. And then you have this other level of what this treatment can cause a person to feel and experience. And coupling that with a good portion of your patient population, this is the end of the road that they're trying this treatment for. A lot of people that come to this treatment have not some of them may have not experienced any type of mind altering drug. They're not a psychonaut. You're going to have some of those folks calling and making consultation calls and all that kind of stuff. But there's going to be some that they've never had this type of experience, and they're coming in extremely vulnerable, and they're putting a lot of trust in you. And so I think it's recognizing the seriousness of where your patients are at and how that is actually a good portion of your patients. The vulnerability, the amount of trust they bring, or trust, they're hoping that they can trust you and that you're wielding something very powerful. And so just recognizing that dynamic, it can be a lot. If you don't feel that this is a calling, that this is aligned with how you want to be as a healer, as a healthcare provider, this isn't for you. And therefore, I think where we've seen some of these clinics that aren't here anymore, that they opened up, they thought this was going to be a cash cow. They saw other clinics doing really well. They thought, oh, I can do this too. And then they recognize, oh, geez, some of these patients are very complex. There's a lot that I'm having to take on, and they didn't take it seriously going into it. Maybe they didn't have the most robust or worthwhile reason to go into starting this all. And so that has led to the failure.
Yeah. And I think to really underscore it and bring up one word related to this is integrity. And by integrity, doing it in the crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. Because again, as we had mentioned, patients are vulnerable. Number one, it's mental health crisis in the world going on right now. And these are vulnerable patients. But I've heard reports and cases where physicians will take advantage of their patients, like having inappropriate relationships, and that'll lead to the demise of your clinic. And we know that as part of our Hippocratic Oath is to do no harm. And when someone is in a vulnerable space, to take advantage of that, I think is really a detriment to not only like ketamine clinics, but just as a physician or a healthcare provider. Like, they're trusting you and they're being very open and vulnerable. And to not take it seriously, this is just some fun game or whatever it is. And we're all about being lighthearted and stuff, of course. But when it comes down to therapy, yeah, this is literally a profession. You need to hold yourself to the highest standard of ethics and integrity as possible.
If you tuned in to our episode today, chances are you're curious about the ins and outs of starting up a ketamine clinic. It's an exciting field, but let's face it, the journey from idea to actually opening day can be quite daunting. That's why we've created something special for you. Think of it as your personal roadmap, a free downloadable checklist that lays out the essential steps you need to consider when starting up your ketamine clinic. This checklist is designed to help you avoid common pitfalls and launch your trajectory to success. So how can you get your hands on this checklist? Simple. Just visit www.ketaminestartup.com/checklist and grab your free copy today. We've made it easy and accessible because we believe in supporting our community with a valuable resource. ketaminestartup.com/checklist. All right, let's get back to our discussion. Stay tuned and don't forget to download your free checklist during or after the podcast. Ways you can fail as a ketamine clinic. Number 8 is over-focusing on profits instead of patients. This is very similar to saying, or the underlying reason why somebody would say yes to people they shouldn't say yes, or provide ketamine therapy to those that shouldn't be getting ketamine therapy, or selling ketamine or prescribing ketamine to patients to use at home. You're focusing on the dollar instead of the patient. Again, I just echoing this last point, is you're not focusing on where the patient's at, what the patient needs, where they're coming from, and where they would like to go, where they would like their life to go after or during this treatment or sessions of treatments. And you're just thinking, okay, how can I not only pay my overhead, but also make this very profitable? I know sometimes we get hung up on this because we are so burnt out and tired from our salaried position at a hospital that we're tired of losing our autonomy. We just want to be able to leave and just be ready to go. And I need to make this work. I need to have money now. And that loses sight of what we just mentioned about how this is something you need to take very seriously, because it's not like you're not just selling something. There's more to it. I don't know. What's your take on this?
Yeah, what I've noticed is that the people who are, and this may apply to you, the listener, where you're like, I'm thinking about a clinic. And if the primary motivation is, I just want to make money, I would say don't do like start up a ketamine clinic because you'll probably make more money just working at your regular job in the or emergency department without all the other thoughts about opening up a clinic. As an example, there's this funny meme that's, hey, I quit my 40-hour-a-week job to work for myself and now I work 80 hours a week, which means there's a lot of uncompensated time where you're going to be thinking about the clinic even when you're not there. You're going to think about HR or staffing or finances or marketing or whatever it may be. And that's all uncompensated. Whereas when I worked in the ER, boom, go into shift at 11 a.m., get done at 8 p.m., and I'm like done for the rest of the day. I might be thinking about that patient. Oh, should I have sent that person home instead of CT scanning their belly or whatever it may be? I'm not really thinking as much about ER work when I'm done, like clock on, clock off, and I'm done. And I can let other people worry about, hey, do I have enough Band-Aids or gauze or a chest tube, supplies and inventory, et cetera. Whereas with a clinic, you're going to be thinking about it a lot. Bottom line is that if profit is the primary motivator, we suggest do not start up a clinic. You will fail because when the rubber meets the road, when things get tough, you're going to fold. And I've seen this with other clinics. I remember one person, they opened up a clinic and they were near the end of their job. They were about to retire. And it was actually a competitor here in the Palm Springs area where they opened for 6 months, thinking that it was going to be this super easy peasy cush job, something they could do as they're fading into their retirement. Turns out the primary motivation was profit. And so when it actually got tough or they met some challenges, they folded. And so do not focus on the profits, focus on the patients, making their experience as best as possible, healing, treating, taking care of these people. But if profit is the primary motivation, I would suggest to not even to venture down this road.
And patients know. We've all experienced it. We know when the clinic you're at or a spa or a restaurant is all about just taking your money versus they're honored to be serving you. There's that difference. Patients will know. They're very attuned to it. And they know when you're moving the beat. And it's little things like you don't spend a little bit of extra time, or it truly does come across that you're just rushing them through some sort of integration, or you're just counting down the time to see if they've recovered so that you can put another person in that chair. Or, oh, you know what? Maybe not. Let's not do separate rooms. We could split a room into two and put a curtain in and have two patients in there too. Like they can feel it. They will know it. There's times that you can just think of those times where you're just like, yeah, they're just trying to take my dollar. It's going to be the same thing for your patient. And not only is this just an awful way to practice because it's totally opposite of what you've been taught. You've been probably taught by somebody, a senior or an attending or a mentor, like you treat patients like you treat people or patients how you would treat your grandmother or your mother or your aunt or your sister. And this is no different. And it's not only just a good practice as a human being, as a practitioner, but also from a marketing standpoint, like me putting on my marketing hat, like you're going to get the worst testimonials and reviews. The reality is if people have bad experiences, they will let you know online or let somebody know online. And then you're going to have to deal with, why did I get that 1-star review on my Google page or on Yelp? And what do I do about that? Then you just bought yourself another headache, especially if you're so concerned about, oh, that's going to make my rankings look bad and blah, blah, blah. And so it's just even from a marketing standpoint, it's awful. And then also remember, your stability comes from patients that may need to have boosters. So providing a good service that is heart-centered is not only just good practice, but also it's actually good for profit, dare I say it, from the marketing standpoint. And so just keeping in mind, I think putting the patient first, remembering first you are a practitioner, first you are a healer, then you are a business person. And this may business people might be thinking, oh, this is awful. This is true. I would stand by this 100%. You got to remember who you are first. And then I think if you stay aligned, the money will follow.
Yeah, that reminds me of this beautiful quote. I think it was Walt Disney who said, "We don't make movies to make money. We make money to make movies." And that really resonates with me because they're making the money, but not for the money's sake, but to make, like, because that's what they loved doing. And so for me at the clinic, this is what I love doing. The reason we need to make money is to make it sustainable so that we can treat more patients and help them as many as possible. Like for me, I really feel like it's part of my life purpose. And that's what I've noticed. A lot of our students who have been successful, like they're like, yeah, this is part of what I'm meant to be doing, right? This is aligned with my purpose and values. And like the reason for me existing and being here is to provide this very unique service in a transformational way. And so it's not only even more gratifying than money is actually helping someone tremendously in a way that they thought would be impossible. Like to me, that's incredibly rewarding. And it's not necessarily the financial, it's just that emotional, spiritual nourishment that comes from working with this medicine.
Moving on to number 9, not addressing the psychedelic experience. And we've alluded to this in some of the other ways to fail. And I think it, especially talking about the preparation and the integration afterwards. A lot of clinics and healthcare providers are very good about the physical aspect of the preparation. Don't eat, or on the discharge, the afterwards. Okay, no, you're not driving, here's your ride. Maybe stay away from heavy machinery. But there's also that psychological emotional component that when you're not addressing the psychedelic experience or acknowledging it or actually embracing it, that you can get into trouble. You can fail.
Yeah. And I think in an earlier podcast interview with Dr. Joe Tafur, we touched upon this in that interview where he said some of these patients are going to have these deep, mystical, spiritual experiences, maybe even connecting with God or the inner divine or nature or source, whatever they want to call it, and not being aware that could happen and that it could be incredibly therapeutic for them would definitely be a way to fail because, as we had mentioned, ketamine can create these really interesting, novel experiences. I know in the emergency department, we would call emergence delirium, where they're coming out of it and they're freaking out and having a panic attack and like just boggled out of their mind. Of course, we're not giving those high doses at that rapid rate. So we want to prevent emergence delirium, but it does create hallucinations and not being aware or addressing, how that's going to play a role in their healing can be definitely a way to fail for sure.
And this brings us to number 10, scaling too early or taking on the wrong investors. Similar to a lot of specialty clinics, ketamine is no different. Venture capital, private equity is coming into this space. As an ophthalmologist, if you aren't part of an academic center, and you're probably part of a large group, then these groups are being bought out by investors. And so it's the way of the world currently, and ketamine therapy clinics, fusion clinics are no different. And we've seen some clinics do well, thrive, and we've seen some that they don't exist anymore. They were absorbed or they're gone. And what I think is funny is perhaps it goes with looking at the dollar. You've left something, you left a salaried position, you became your own boss, you built this clinic up, and somebody approaches you and you see some dollar signs that you're like, okay, all right. And maybe you say no at first because you still love that autonomy, but maybe over time you're just getting tired because it's a lot of work. We talk about our clinic every day, anytime, holidays, trips, on vacations, we are working on our clinic. It's a lot. And for some folks, eventually the right amount of money comes around that somebody offers. But for most of these clinics, it's not like they're just going to pay you and then you leave, right? Then you're going to be drinking Mai Tais on a beach all day. No, you're going to be actually still working there. Perhaps you'll be more of a figurehead, or you're still manning the clinic because the patients know you and you've lost your autonomy. And now you're being told how you are supposed to run the clinic, or the patient's slow. And you liked it being slower because you were all aboard about the psychedelic experience, the set and setting, but now things have changed. And we've seen some folks become very unhappy being in that type of position. We've seen other people bounce back. And so I think it may not be necessarily a business failure, but it could be a failure for the practitioner as an individual. That's my take on this one.
Yeah, and I think it's totally fine to get investors, but as we had mentioned, the wrong investors. So some investors, private equity VC, they want to find that unicorn, that latest Google or Facebook where they can invest $1,000 and get $1 million back, or invest $1 million and get $10 billion back. They want to 100x or 1,000x their initial profits investment. So depends on which type of investor you get, because some people are like, you know what, that's not really our goal. We're actually just passionate about this space and we want to help as many people as possible. So there may be that kind of investor. So having that discernment of who are the right people that I want to work with and that I want to allow them to enter my company to be an investor, I think that's crucial. As Kim mentioned, scaling way too early. Let's say you're at one clinic, it's not super busy, but you're like, we need to make more money. So I'm going to open up another clinic and a fourth clinic. And by then your resources are spread thin. And again, we have seen that where clinic will get acquired by a venture capital or private equity, and they feel pressure to expand. And they're like, hey, we need to grow and you need to have 10x your EBIT and you need to grow at a 50% a month or whatever. You need to open up a clinic once a month for the next 12 months or whatever it may be. And again, that's going to lead to failure because this work, it's not like McDonald's where we're just serving hamburgers and milkshakes and fries. This is work. And again, the patients are very vulnerable, can be very vulnerable or enter that vulnerable space. And I think scaling too early, taking on the wrong type of people to invest in your company would be a huge mistake.
I think this final mistake here or way to fail is lacking discernment and not being clear on your values. We're all about values here at Ketamine Startup. It's being really clear on who you are and how you want to serve and having this being aligned with who you are. You have to be clear on that because then that will help you have the discernment of, do these investors, are they aligned with my values and goals? What's heartbreaking is that we've seen where, I don't recall which state it was in, but there was somebody that decided, the investors sounded like they wanted to help this clinic grow, they expanded, and then they became the funding arm for these investors. And then they had to shut down. And so all of those patients in that team were so passionate about serving, no longer had them as a clinic to go to. So they had to go scramble and find other practitioners, which I guess you could argue was great for those other folks. But I think it's just, and then there's also something to acknowledge that sometimes you just don't know. You don't have a crystal ball. It's a few podcasts ago, we were like so sure that MDMA was going to be approved. And so it wasn't. When there's no crystal ball. We can't tell what's going to happen. And sometimes you just don't know. Maybe you thought you were aligned and you weren't in reality. But I think just being clear on if you felt your heart was in the right place, you took the time to practice discernment. That's the best you can do. But yeah, I said, again, I don't know. If I had one tagline from this whole episode is be clear on who you are. And I hope you're doing all of this out of service for the patient. So any closing thoughts for you, Sam?
Yeah, I would say thank you for staying till the very end. Now the top 10 ways you can fail as a ketamine clinic and some of the strategies to avoid that. But I think the first step is by you listening to this, you become conscious of these things because you're hearing from us who've been in this field for quite some time. And that way this is what I'm not going to do to fail. So really appreciate you all listening, and we look forward to connecting again on the next episode. Take care. Bye.